Welcome to Blackbird episode number 50. My name is James, and today I am joined by Andrew, better known as Popular Liberty. You know him from the King Pilled chat. You know him from his own YouTube channel, and you know him from just about every other podcast in this space. He is the developer of a theory framework, something like that, called archotropism, which I wrote about a couple of weeks ago. If you would like to check that out, I'm going to leave a link in the show notes. If you'd like to get updates for everything that I write, then certainly you should be signed up with your email address at blackbirdpodcast.com. I don't have a whole lot of intro for this. I do have an ad for you. It's a new sponsor. It's called Football Insider Edge. I remember when I was little, my dad would go to a bar with his friends every week and play fantasy football. This was back in the 80s. I didn't understand it then. To be honest, I still don't understand it. But one thing I do like is having a little fun, placing bets, and hopefully making some money. If you love playing fantasy football, or if you're just hopeless at it, like I am, but you kind of like making money, I found the perfect resource for you. Go to footballinsideredge.com. Use offer code Blackbird at checkout to get signed up. You get 20% off your monthly or full season plan. Whether you play for the entire season, whether you're focused on DraftKings and FanDuel contests, or you just like to make the occasional wager, Football Insider Edge provides you with research tools and in-depth analysis to take your game to the next level. With their proprietary model, matchup charts, and award-winning content, the team at Football Insider Edge have devoted themselves to educating their subscribers, helping them improve their play, and in a few special moments, winning life-changing money. These guys are super proud of the community they've built around their fantasy football hobby. They've got a Slack chat where they directly interact with their clientele. They take great pride in helping others achieve the goal of becoming better fantasy players. And once again, for listeners of this show, they're offering a 20% discount on any monthly or full season plan. If you're into fantasy football or would like to be, head over to footballinsideredge.com. Use offer code Blackbird at checkout to get signed up today. And with that, Popular Liberty. Andrew, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, James, it's good to see you.
All right, so this is the first time we've ever talked. You've been kind of making the rounds on podcasts for the last several months talking about your archotropism theory. So we can probably get into that a little bit and some new stuff. And I've kind of just in passing heard some things recently that I wanted to get your take on. Before we do that, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience so that they know who we're talking to?
Hi, I'm Andrew, and I'm an addict. Wrong.
Wrong support group.
Yeah, wrong support group. No, I'm a problem child. I'm just a guy with a podcast, and I made this, framework for helping to understand power. This is something I've been kind of working on since 2017 to try to help libertarians understand, hey, there's this other side of, I guess you could call it economics that, and you've been kind of ignoring it for 50 years. And this is why you've gotten nowhere, because all of your strategies are kind of designed around, 95% of economics, and this other 5% right over here is what I'm trying to talk about with the archotropism framework, which is a mixture of thermodynamics and economics.
Nice. But when you're talking economics, you're not talking charts and graphs. You're talking praxeology, right?
Yeah, praxeology.
Okay. Good. Just wanted to clear
Austrian
that up.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Because technically or nominally, this isn't a libertarian podcast. So maybe some of my viewers or listeners don't know anything about that. So maybe we can get into that a little bit too. I know you talk a lot about time preference for power. Do you want to start there? Is that a good place to start, or do you want to start somewhere else?
I usually start with the idea that the power has value. That idea of I can coerce you to give me stuff.
Yeah,
that's the value of it. And this is something that libertarians they like to hand wave it away as, oh well, that's evil. And okay, sure, it is, and it is evil. There's no getting around that. But calling it evil doesn't really stop it from having value. And that's why people do it. It's why we have states. So if you understand that, from like a Misesian standpoint, that anything that has value will be done to the maximum of that value, because you have the human action axiom that, basically people, humans try to they use means over time to, produce ends, so to speak. And I just summarized it. I didn't say it exactly, but if you understand that, well, okay, you can also logically deduce that they're going to, try to use the least amount of means to get the most amount of ends. It's they're economizing, they're maximizing. So okay, well, if something has value, the state, which is the hierarchy for that value, it's going to, the state, people are going to, do this aggressive behavior to the point where it is a profit maximizer. They're going to do it the least amount to where they get the most bang. They want to get the most bang for their buck. And just calling that evil, it doesn't stop. They're still going to do it. So that's where I usually start. And of course, the idea of hierarchy comes from the idea that, hey, we're going to, we want to collectivize as a species so we can get stuff done and we want to work together. And so the way that ends up happening is that, well, when you come together, you can't quite democratize that. It doesn't work. So what you do is you outsource the decision-making behavior to someone who's really competent and understands it. And you say, okay, they get all the responsibility and all of the power for decision-making. And then we can, work together as a group to organize it and be a lot more productive. So if you understand that these two are essential behaviors to all human, not aggression, but hierarchy is something essential to all human economy, all production, and it's something we do because it has value. In addition, this aggression is also something humans do because it has value. Okay, well then you have a hierarchy for a state, for aggression, and both of which are inevitable, and because they have value.
So what?
And this is where we get a state from.
Yeah. So how do we come to a point where aggression is minimized, I guess? Is that possible? Am I skipping too far ahead in your framework?
Kind of, but the problem is that, you would have to do is make it so that it's not profitable. And that's a risk cost. That's a cost of risk. So if you have, from what you've told me of your audience, I'm sure there are quite a few short-term, high-risk investment analysts, or as most people call them, poker players.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've done 2 shows on crypto trading alone. So yeah.
Yeah. There's plenty of people. Yeah, poker players particularly, they'll know the expected value equation, EV. It's the percent chance of profit times the percent chance. It's the amount of profit times the percent chance of profit. So like the percent chance you're going to win minus the the cost of risk, which is what you stand to lose, multiplied by the percent chance of losing. So when you have aggression, what you want to do, or something of value, it's like what is that value is kind of relative to, well, who am I going to be going after? Is it do I want to go predate? If I'm a mugger, do I want to go rob the cop or the old lady? The old lady's way less risk. The cop's going to, I'm not going to come back from that. Because the cop is stronger, he's armed, and he's also has a history of mental aggression. It's like he's got some problems. Don't look up 20% of cops. Or was it 80% or 20%?
I thought it was 80%, but that I don't know. It might be inflated statistics for us. For us anti-coppers. I'm not sure.
Yeah, don't look it up. So basically, that's like you want to have the most profit to go after the people who can't fight back. Because that's your risk cost. So you want to have the most profit for least risk.
Just to clarify, the statistic we're talking about is the proclivity for police officers to commit domestic violence. Which,
that one. One.
It's much higher than the population at large. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, far higher. Yeah, high rates of PTSD too. Whoops.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, and same with military. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, mental illness is certainly a problem, but statism causes a ton of it. So.
Yeah, and that is to its advantage. Hey, when you have something like like that, where that's reason for a state to exist, because you have the state. The state can say, well, I'm here to give everybody an aggressively enforced order. Because if you think that if you believe that everybody has the right to defend themselves, and then you realize, well, okay, the best kind of defense is a really good offense. And that's very basic strategy.
Sure.
So therefore you get, okay, well, an aggressive order might not be moral, but it is the best kind of defensive, order.
So do you think that individuals should be banding together to commit aggression against the state?
No, that would be a terrible idea because they're gonna kick our ass.
That's so dumb, right?
But the idea is if you're wanting to minimize the demand for an aggressive order, what you would have to do is create a kind of people who cannot be aggressed against. That's a monumental Herculean task that is virtually impossible. Because think about what kind of person do you not want to go after? It's kind of like the cop. So you would need basically a world where everybody is basically as aggressive or as defensive as a cop, or they're as unaggressive as a cop. And it's not that a cop can't be killed or can't be attacked, but there's quite a lot of risk there. And if everyone was like that, then you wouldn't really have a need for aggression, for an aggressive order, because it's just there's too much. The aggression itself does not have value because the risk cost from the other side of the EV is too high. But therein lies that the problem is that getting humans to not be to be unaggressible, to be strong and courageous and well armed and and trained. This is a real tall task.
Do you put any stock in those cyclical views of history where, it's that strong men create good times create weak men create bad times create strong men, that kind of thing. But also, Vin Armani has popularized another cyclical view, which is pretty similar, but it uses archetypes instead of just that slogan.
Yeah, the four turnings.
The four turnings as well. Yeah.
Quite a few different ones. Yeah, I have a climate cycle too that I subscribe to. That
really?
If you go through human history, all of the really bad times where states get their heads cut off is like climate change. Mm-hmm. This is why the state right now is like fucking terrified, is because we're at the end of one of those climate cycles right now. It's a warming cycle. Usually when it gets really cold, agriculture gets tough, because it's cold and plants don't like that.
Sure.
And so it gets, so people get hungry, and when they're hungry, they get hangry, and king gets his head cut off. Or alternatively, a smarter king will say, it's their fault. Let's go invade them and take their stuff. And that's when you get war. So it's like one of two options. You're either the smart king who understands that it's the other guy's problem, not mine. It's not me. Or you're the dumb king who gets his head cut off. And that's like literally you go through like 6,000 years of human history. Every time the climate turns down by 1 or 2 degrees, you get famine, you get pestilence and plague, and you get one state after another gets its head cut off. And that's why they're freaking out right now about climate change. It's not about to get a lot warmer. It's about to get a lot colder. And they want the control, ahead of time so that they can, avoid that head cutting off.
So why are they so talking about global warming so much?
It's an excuse for grabbing power.
Oh.
If they get that power ahead of time, then they can hopefully save themselves. But I think they're barking up the wrong tree. Nothing's going to save them at this point.
Interesting.
But that's the basic idea of it. But yeah, the cyclical view of history, because just for humans, I definitely subscribe to that. Just change over time. Because if you think about it, that nothing quite stays the same. You'll get new technology that's disrupted. By the way, climate change is like the number one killer of states.
Mm-hmm.
And new technology is like number 2. So if you think like the times roads, or Rome really started learning how to mass produce roads, and that's helped them move their armies across vast distances and slaughter people. And that was a new technology. When we got like deep sea water navigation, that basically broke the Ottoman Empire apart, because they had survived for hundreds of years by just managing by attacking the trade routes, because you used to have to keep your ships pretty close to the shoreline, because you didn't have big enough ships that could withstand the high seas, and they would just break apart. And so you used to have but if you have to stay in close to the shorelines, well, okay, you're subject to pirates now, because pirates know where you have to go.
Yeah.
And when you have deep sea water navigation, you just go anywhere. And that, so we invented that, and that destroyed the Ottoman Empire. And then, eventually we got like railroads, and that, fucked over Europe and gave us a united Germany, which I'm sure that was trouble for us in World War One. And then after, and of course, when you have like democracy, you can't just have one war, you got to have multiple wars. So we did a world war a second time. And and in order to win that, we created the microchip, which is all really bad things have come, like that was another major killer of governments once we figured that one out. And now we have this new technology called social media, which has homogenized a whole bunch of different groups. Mm-hmm. So, and this is another reason why they're totally freaking out. They're at the end of a climate cycle, and they got this new disruptive technology that just fucked them in the ass in 2016. And now they're really having to scramble to, learn the lesson of history and not let this new disruptive technology beat them. Because now what it's doing is you had all of these, disparate classes of people that never talked to each other, never exchanged ideas, never had a real marketplace of ideas. But now you do have that, and all of these people that used to be separated are now all talking to each other. And turns out there's a lot of homogenization going on, where you have now the left class and the right class. It's no longer stratified by race or religion or economic class, or even ruling class and non-ruling class. You're starting to get all of these different ideas mixed and homogenized into two very, very distinct worldviews. And when your job as a state is to be an organized minority outwitting the unorganized and dim-witted majority, and all of a sudden there's no longer a disorganized group. It's all two groups. Mm-hmm. It's like now you have to be the organized majority, and that's a much bigger. That's much harder, and they're not winning yet. They're really, really not winning, and that terrifies them. Their job just got a whole lot harder with this new disruptive thing.
How do you define left and right?
Left and right, I define them by by their time preference for power. I think that's in terms of, because these are political distinctions. So, okay, you should make the varying factor something that is political. And I think the best factor that is most predictive is their time preference for power. So if you have like someone who's on the left, there's someone who's going to really, really want to consume a lot more of society's wealth and turn it into political power, coercive power. And they want to do a lot more welfare programs. They want to have a lot more economic regulation. They want to have a lot higher taxes, and they want to have a lot more wars, of conquest. And you'll see a lot of these different, attitudes where they want to convert somebody else's wealth into their own coercive power. And that's something, and I call that like a high time preference for power, meaning they really want to spend the future production, capacity, economic capacity right now on coercive political means. And whereas the right, they want to do it a whole lot less. They don't want to do it zero, but they want to do it less. And by the way, let's not confuse, right wing with Republican.
Sure.
Those are not the same, unfortunately. But, the right generally wants to do that a whole lot less. They want a lot more minimalist. They want a lot more private property and a lot more liberty and a lot more, a lot fewer government programs and government activities. And they actively say, the government that governs best is the one that governs least. Mm-hmm. And the, libertarians by extension are kind of further more extreme of that, where they want virtually zero or zero. Wealth converted into, coercive power. Mm-hmm. And
so they would have like an infinite time preference for.
No, they'd have a zero.
A zero time preference for power. I get for some reason I get high and low time preference confused in my brain.
I know.
I had to convert it to immediacy preference in order for it to make sense for me.
Yeah.
So what about the people who are like the powers behind the throne, who we always hear have like generational aspirations rather than immediate aspirations? Would they then be like the super low time preference far right, or are they on the left, or are they somewhere else?
What's really interesting about our ruling class is that they're all in the middle. And so this is something you see that all of the incentives to getting power, because if you understand that, power is all, power are exchangeable, or at least it's a one-way exchange technically, but the wealth, power, and influence, they're a one-way exchange. But if you understand that, okay, well, you need to produce something in order for somebody else to predate upon it. It's something Rothbard talked about in his Anatomy of the States, that production does have to precede predation. Like, you can't predate on something that doesn't exist. Or that's illogical.
Sure.
So the reason the rulers have a middle preference, that's what's most adaptable, because they can see both sides and understand that, okay, and this is what makes it easier to get elected, and because you can talk to both sides of people and get that median voter, and that all important median voter, and you can but you can also see how power works and understand that, okay, that production isn't all that's there. I have to be taking too, and there was a science to taking stuff, and it's not an art, and it's not nearly as simple as it seems. And acquiring and maintaining power it's not very easy. And so if you're all the way on one side where you're kind of like a really far right libertarian, and you have a virtually zero time preference for power, what this really entails is that you don't really sense that those power incentives are there. That's why you have such a zero preference for them, is because you can't feel those incentives. They don't exist to you. And so you're not aware of them. And this is a problem that a lot of libertarians have, is they're not aware of the power incentives. And this is why I'm trying to push it on them using thermodynamics language, that's something that a lot of these engineer brains can really get their heads around. And by the way, it really is kind of weird that, the laws of power really do seem to almost mimic, not quite, but almost mimic thermodynamics. But we'll get to that probably later. But if you're on the other side too, where all you want to do is you look forward to the day when we're all wearing state-issued gunny suits and saluting dear leader. It's like, that guy doesn't get elected either, because he has no sense of production. Like, those production incentives don't exist to him. He sees everything as a zero-sum game of power. And that, but if you're in the middle, you can kind of see both, and therefore you can adapt to both. The middle is the most adaptable position. This is why we're stuck with moderates on both sides.
Yeah.
Moderates.
So are you saying that it would be nearly impossible for someone like that to come to power in democracy or whatever, like the United States? I mean, obviously, I'm using the word democracy loosely.
Yeah, oligarchy.
Yeah.
But it's tough for somebody at the wings, to join the oligarchy in the middle, because that's just not who they are, and it's obvious that's not who they are. And it's like the Ron Pauls and the Bernie Sanders are both fairly equally rare. Because of that. Because they have no sense of the other side, and you really do need to understand both to keep and acquire more power over time. So if you're these powers behind the throne, who understand that, okay, this thing is kind of the real power is actually behind the throne, not the throne itself. And it's much better to be the financier of the throne. It's much better to be the Iron Bank, for in Game of Thrones, than it is to be, one of the guys fighting for the throne, because most of them are going to die.
Yeah, because then you can find both sides, and
and the Iron Bank lives on.
Yeah,
and I mean, that's a story as old as time. That you can go all the way back to Samaria and find stuff about the interest rates and the lenders are a problem. They would still lend to both sides back then, cause the war, and then rule over the ashes afterwards. To whoever the indebted king was that lived.
Sure.
And I mean, that is a 6,000-year-old. So that's not going anywhere.
One of those cyclical views of history is the one that Vin Armani talked about, and I know I mentioned it earlier. It's not quite the fourth turning. It's based on Indian, like the caste system.
The Varmas, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And from the looks of things, we are switching right now from the sort of politician. It's, I mean, in the Varna system, it's the priesthood, but the priesthood in the modern church is obviously the political class. Obviously, priests don't produce anything; they're beholden to their financiers, and eventually the financiers come to power. And I think that's what we're transitioning to right now. Is that what you see too?
Kinda. It's I do think I almost I don't want to disagree with Venn because I think he's very intelligent. He's also studied this a lot more than I have.
Yeah.
But I'm almost thinking we're coming to the end of the mystical age and entering the material age, which is very contrarian, kind of ironic, because I see that the myth that's ending is this liberalism idea, and it never works every time. Every time it's tried, it never works. And
how many times has it been tried? Are you talking about liberalism specifically or mysticism?
It's a mysticism of liberalism, because I think it's kind of a myth. Democracy has been tried, on and off, for the last few centuries.
Okay,
I should say the last few millennia. Greece and Rome are the obvious ones, the Carthage too, and you had some republics scattered throughout monarchical Europe. They never lasted. And they like every time it's tried, it always descends into failure after like 1 or 2 centuries. It just doesn't work. And the problem is it gets too corrupt too quickly. When you reward people for dividing people, that's not a long-term system.
Yeah.
Because the reward conditions for democracy or oligarchy is to get that 50% plus one and fuck all the other guys.
Yeah.
So when you reward people for winning with 50% plus one, that's, it's like you're going to be hopelessly dividing people, and you're going to be making false promises to get that. And you're going to be squandering the wealth of society to keep and maintain power. And so basically you're rewarding people for dividing people, squandering society's wealth. And that can't last. It never does.
As long as the ruling class is in the center, as it was, maybe from World War II through 1996 or so, then that 50% plus one is a bipartisan thing.
Pretty much.
Whereas since then, it has become so more and more like us versus them that we're only noticing the breakdown now, even though it might have been inevitable since the very beginning.
Not quite.
No?
Because used to do, and they changed this law, I think it was in 2007, where the money that you donated politically had to go into the party first and then got distributed. Oh. And so the parties were like, okay, we're not messing with the radicals. And it was McCain Feingold was the law. Good old John McCain was the one who changed this law and said, oh, you can just donate directly to the candidates. And when they changed that law, this is when you started getting a lot more partisanship. Because now all of a sudden people could directly donate to the people they actually wanted to donate to.
I thought McCain Feingold restricted what you could donate to candidates.
They pass it. They say it that way, but really.
Wow, I had no idea. All right.
A lot of times they do it exactly the opposite, where they would they'll say we're doing this to stop it, and really they're doing it to entrench it. It's like the Save the Puppies Act is like the puppy holocaust. It's like you're going to save just a few of the puppies, and that's that's often one of the state's favorite tricks is to say we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it or something like that. Of course. And we have to pass this to save the program, pass Obamacare, save healthcare, and what they really do is just make it many times more expensive. And they always use that kind of rationale of this is to save the system and make it better. And really, no, that's not what it does.
So you came to this. I think a lot of people just kind of assume that you formulated this based on Curtis Yarvin. And no. As it turns out, you had never even read Curtis Yarvin.
Never read him.
Are you following him now?
I'm reading him now. It's
okay.
like when I finally find someone. Usually, it's like when I come. I'm really intuitive. I don't want to brag, but I'm intuitive.
Sure, yeah.
It's like, and I've learned that in my old age of 28, I've learned the humility of usually if I've come up with a good idea, I'm probably not the first person to come up with this, and I should probably go find whoever else it is this out and see what they thought about it. And, that because, I'm usually not the first because people have been around for a lot longer than I have. And so like with archotropism, that might be an original because I've really looked. I couldn't find anybody who's talked about archotropism first.
Yeah.
The thing with Curtis Yarvin, though, is that is like, one of the major solutions to the state problem that we have right now that comes out of the archotropism framework, and it's really obvious, is turn it into a for-profit corporation.
Right.
And when you have the first and the third laws working together, I won't get into that too deeply, but it makes it really obvious that, okay, you're going to need some sort of for-profit motive to take away a lot of the bad motivations that come with the quest for power. Like having to go to war and having to really aggress hardcore against people, having to lie, cheat, steal, et cetera, et cetera. These are things that come out of a not-for-profit model of government, and a for-profit model of government that makes it explicit that we're here to make money, that subjects all of the state's incentives to economic incentives, which are much more in line with human nature.
Yeah, and reality.
Or I should say, much less contrary to it.
Yeah.
So but he apparently figured this out in at least in 2007. He probably figured it out earlier than that, but he started writing about it in 2007. And I was in middle school at the time, so it's like I wasn't reading him. And but when I found out about him, probably in the last 2 years, I like, oh my God, this is finally I have someone else who understands what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought I was just talking to myself this whole time.
So just to clear up, the first and third laws of archotropism basically is that value is relative and value is subjective, right?
Pretty much.
Specifically, the value of power.
Yeah,
but just like the value of every economic good.
Pretty much. Well, the value of economic goods are absolute and subjective. So in other words, the power is something that it only has value because someone else doesn't have it. And you don't have something like food, which is like a consumable or something like that. It has value because it has inherent utility. It doesn't have value specifically because, James doesn't have it. It's like, I can have my thing of CBD has value to me because it helps me in my body. Yeah. It doesn't have value because James doesn't have it.
Okay, well, but I guess I would push back a little bit in the sense that, like, luxury goods. I mean, if you drive a Honda and I drive a Rolls Royce, mm-hmm. I might get to the show more comfortably than you, but we're both going to get there. Would you say maybe that power is like the ultimate luxury good? Would that?
Kinda, yeah. But it's the ultimate in scarcity because there's no real, it's value. There's no real way to produce more of it. It's the, It's a lot it's probably a little bit scarcer than Bitcoin because even Bitcoin, it has inherent utility as a system of payments and, store of value, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, but it is, really, really finite and scarce. There's only so many Bitcoins.
Sure.
Whereas with power, because it's all percents of a whole, anytime you create more power, you're just diluting what already existed. So this is another reason why the state has an incentive to punish production, is because producing new wealth is power. New wealth is new power, and that devalues, the power that they had already consolidated. Okay. So anytime you're dealing with percents of a whole, it's basically inflation. That's what they're doing. It's a reverse inflation where it's all percents of a whole rather than something that has intrinsic value. And again, it goes back to that EV equation where we're talking about, okay, the person I want to predate upon is the person who doesn't have power, and that person, going after that person has a more value to me as because they can't really fight back, and the value of coercion has to be directly proportional to the risk that comes along with that coercion of someone fighting back and killing you. And so like a little old lady, again, is way easier to aggress against than the cop, and that, because they're less risk.
Mhm.
And it's more, that's the value of coercion is directly relevant to whoever doesn't have power. That's what it's relative to.
So if you had to sum that up into like maybe one sentence, would it just be something like power is zero sum and
yeah, the value of power is always conserved.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So that's
It
maybe
can
a
neither
rule.
be created nor destroyed.
Yeah. Right. So thermodynamics.
Yeah, I wrote, one second, let me pull it up. I wrote it in thermodynamics language because that was what was, so it was so obvious that it makes it so clear. The value of power is relative, not absolute.
Uh-huh.
Therefore, the value of power can neither be created nor destroyed. It may be transferred from one wielder to another or transformed from one form into another. The sum total value of power is always conserved.
What are some of the forms of power that you're referring to there?
Potential or kinetic.
Mm-hmm.
Kinetic is obviously that's the coercive part. That's that's me, holding a gun up to you and saying, "Give me your money." That's kinetic. And so when the government says you're going to pay me this amount on April 15th, and I'll see you next year, it's like this. And if you don't, I'm going to throw your ass in a cage. That's kinetic. And there's no getting around that. When you anything else that is not kinetic is potential power. So anything that's wealth, influence, manpower, firepower.
Mm-hmm.
These are all, as long as they're not in use for coercion right now, they're potential. And basically everything that is not coercive power, everything that has value that is not coercive is potential power. Because it can be converted into power.
So do you think that Mark Zuckerberg is converting his power from potential to kinetic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. Basically, what you see that so you remember how a lot of more voluntarists and ANCAPs, they'll say that, okay, well, my property, my rules. And so, that is an inevitable outcome of the private property that started 600 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, with basically when private property started, you had the Black Death sweep through Europe, killed like 60% of the population. The wages of the peasants went through the roof. And all of a sudden they were able to afford to buy their freedom, out of feudalism. That was the private property was the end of feudalism because the peasants were able to buy their own property from the feudal lord. And so when you say my property, my rules, what you just did was you told all of the reptiles 600 years ago that what they really need to do to have real hardcore legitimate power is that you need to say that they need to actually own the property. That if they own the property, then they can create any rule that is because back then the feudal lords were kind of everyone knew, okay, this isn't really a legitimate way of doing that, doing government. This is obviously coercive. This is obviously oppressive, and it has that obviousness. The illegitimacy has that obviousness to it, and no matter how much the church or whatever wants to say that, divine right or whatever, everyone knows that's bullshit. And and you feel it in your heart that this is bullshit and that you're just, oppressing me, and it's obvious, and the oppression is obvious.
Yeah.
And so but what happens eventually is when, they know that okay, these guys were just military rulers that rule by, force and coercion. That's not, they're not the legitimate owners of whatever, but I'm going to buy my own, legitimacy or whatever, as kind of like a ransom payment. So when you say that, okay, my property, my rules, you just told the reptiles that, okay, if they if they actually legitimately acquire the property, then they can make any rule and they are legitimate. And so you made private property inevitable for that reason, that they would actively try to cultivate that and try to, make that a lot greater, because eventually they're going to want to, consolidate it. And that's what they're attempting to do right now, with these major corporations like BlackRock and Zuckerberg and all them, is they're gearing up for privatizing statecraft. So they're gearing up for privatizing the state. And it's going to come in the form of, oh gosh, this thing just isn't working anymore. It can't get anything done. It has all of these, restraints, yada yada yada. We're already doing all of the work the government is supposed to be doing, like censoring these right-wing radicals and everything, and keeping and hurting the unvaccinated people and keeping them as second-class citizens. These are all things that the federal government is supposed to be doing, but just isn't. And so, how about we just do away with that and privatize ourselves, since we're the legitimate landowners anyway, and we're going to do what's right. And this is what's coming, because that's the incentive. They want the legitimacy of having power, because if it is your property, it's your rules.
So what comes right after that? I mean, are we headed for like a Philip K. Dick novel?
It's neo-feudalism.
Yeah, for
sure. But not if we can try to escape it. There's that's what I'm hoping to do. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough.
How do you
escape it? That's what they're attempting to do right now, is to privatize the means of statecraft. So it's probably going to exist in a hybrid state for at least for our lives. Where we have this hybrid model of the legacy government of the Constitution and the federal government and all of that, but eventually they're going to be privatizing the activities of state more and more, and to the point where that's going to be you're going to end up having them as the legitimate landowners. Like, I think Bill Gates owns most of the farmland now, and BlackRock owns the real estate, most of the real estate. And there's it's a handful of billionaires now that they basically own everything. They're the legitimate owners, and once you just finally do away with the middleman of our current state, there's nothing stopping them. And
well, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's where this is going. That's why if you read science fiction novels, a private corporate government is in every single one of them.
Yeah.
Because that's the obvious future, is that we're not going to deal with democracy for much longer. That, like even then, like imagine you're on some foreign space world with not that many people and it's really far away, really isolated. Only a corporation has the real incentive to go there and, to extract mineral resources or whatever. And they are the de facto government there. And, you could, any, state that can claim authority or whatever. And, it's like, well, they can write whatever law they want about, to apply to that corporation. But if they're not there to enforce it, it's like it's a letter to Santa, as Michael Malice likes to say. Without the actual cops and the state agents there to enforce the will of the state, this is it's not going to work out. This corporation could like, okay, well, that's cute. We're going to ignore it. We're going to ignore your little law because it doesn't apply to us, and you can't get to us without extraordinary cost.
So what's the best course of action for us peasants, you and me?
My training is as a cybersecurity guy, and the way all hacks work is you don't usually try to create a new process. Usually, you're going to try to hijack an existing process on the target's network, or on the host computer or whatever, and because that's it's a lot easier to go after infect something that's already there. And infect something that already has, programs for, that already, invades the security system or whatever. And, and you do all of these activities to try to disguise, your virus or your worm or whatever as benign and legitimate. And it goes right into this slot over here of like a Word document or something like that. And you open it up, you open the email attachment, and then the virus executes, because it wasn't looking to infect, just, out of the blue. It was, okay, the Word has a type of process it goes through, and it has these startup routines, and it's going to infect this startup routine and run this executable code, in the header, and that isn't supposed to be there, but it is, and the security system isn't quite checking for it. That's okay. What I would do is, hey, if you know that this thing is coming, and this is and it's obviously kind of where the ruling class kind of wants to go, because they want the legitimacy of power. They're incentivized to it. Remember, anything that can happen will happen if you give it enough time. And something that is incentivized, this is kind of where Nietzsche got that idea that, it's not just that people have ideas, it's also that ideas have people. Because incentives will find people, to do them, because people will get rewarded for that. And so if you have this idea that, the people in power are incentivized to privatize the means of statecraft and, keep it for themselves, that is something that, it's going to happen if you just give it enough time. And I think that's where we're headed right now, is kind of a neo-feudalism. So I would try to hack that. If you know it's coming, get ahead of it. Get your own thing in there, privatize your own means of statecraft, and then, be in the mix when the final, hammer of the guillotine comes down on democracy.
Define that a little bit more. How do you hack it? I mean, so like you earlier, you held up a bottle of Paloma Verde CBD, palomaverdecbd.com, offer code Blackbird for 75% off your order. Haha, plugged. I mean, are Carlos and Vanessa doing enough? Is that hacking the system, or is it agorism, or is it just following Jason Stapleton's program and building as much wealth, power, and influence as you can?
It's a mixture of all of them.
Is it the Libertarian Party?
No, it's not the Libertarian Party. Not that one. Not that one. That's the only one.
I'm making friends there. Okay, that's what it is.
I know. It's like I'm pretty friendly to the agorism model, to the wealth, power, and influence model, and to the GOP model. It's like it helps if you're the one with wealth, power, and influence at the time when the final conversion is made. That's when you're going, it's like, okay, you're going to be in the ruling class basically almost permanently. And that's the, you need to get, you yourself are the exploit, that you have to get yourself in there before the clock ticks down to zero. And right now the clock's just ticking down. And so if you're an agorist or you're a wealth, power, and influence guy, I would be looking to buy some of your own formal territory somewhere where you are the state, and you can be a pretty non-aggressive state or pretty voluntary state or whatever. I would be looking to privatize your own means of statecraft somewhere.
Define that. What is statecraft?
Statecraft is the activities of the state. It's the aggression as a service that people are incentivized to want. So it's not just that the state is incentivized to have this aggression, because again, aggression is what has value to it. Hierarchy also has value to it. You put the two together, you get a state. But the primary value of it comes from having a aggression. So it's not just that people. It's not just that the organized minority that is the state has that incentive value. Everyone has that value. And you see this as their time preference for statecraft, where people say, no, I really do want an aggressive order. I really do want to have a state. I want to have someone in charge of regulating this and making sure everything's okay. And I want to have, some cops. I want to have security and all of that stuff. And, I want to have some public education or whatever. And, they're all telling you, like, I'm incentivized. Yeah, I'm okay with the aggression part. It's for the greater good. It's an aggressive order that I think has value to me, and I'm willing to pay for it. And so this is where abolition gets a little tough. You're not going to abolish something people really want and are willing to pay for. Yeah. And so it also makes taxation not quite theft. Unfortunately, it's theft for a few of us who really don't want it. But for the people who do want it, it's not theft. And it's not theft if it's voluntary. If they would have made the same decision, even though they didn't have a choice in the matter, if they would have made the same decision anyway, it's not quite theft. But
either it's not quite theft, or theft isn't always quite wrong.
Yeah, exactly, and it actually is both, because remember that people will behave their incentives and then rationalize backwards. As that they always do it. It's like, I'm getting paid to do action X. Therefore, I'm going to find a justification that satisfies my conscience, if need be, to do action X. So the fact they're getting paid for it and all of this stuff is just rational. The roads and bridges and schools and police and firefighters, EMS and all that shit. That's all just rationalization. You're not arguing. This is the core problem is the incentive, that they are incentivized to have this value. And then everything that comes after that as a rationalization is just rationalization. And that's, it's kind of a cynical view, but it's true economically. So I'm right. That's what again, that's again, I'm using a Misesian economics where if I can prove it's logical, I'm right. And that's why I haven't gotten much pushback on the archotropism framework. Because it is very, very logical. Yeah. It does have value, and people will behave it, and they'll find whatever rationalization makes sense to them to justify that to themselves.
Yarvin's most recent post, which I think is a premium post, so most people aren't going to be able to read it, but it just came out this morning as of the time that we're talking. He declares himself a monarchist, which everybody already knew, but he also declares himself a localist. So basically, the covenant community model that Hoppe formulated. Is that what you're talking about? Are you saying that you and I should just buy up a community?
That's what the archotropism framework would suggest. Is basically become the villages. Yeah, in the Florida they have the villages. Where like all the 55 and older retirement community.
Yeah, sure.
Totally privately owned. And there's completely 100% private. It's not a state. It's not
private security and everything.
Huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. Everything's private. And and of course Sumter County loves it because it's basically it votes like 3-1 for Republicans. Yeah. So it's basically we need to have the private villages everywhere and start turning our local government communities in the villages because you want to still tell the elected officials of Texas or Florida or wherever you are, that hey, we're creating the villages because it's they vote 3-1 for Republicans, and wink wink, that's telling the politicians that this is in their power interest to do. Mm-hmm. And never mind the fact that you just privatized the state.
Yeah, well, and most politicians are useful idiots anyway. I mean, they're not the ruling class. They're the ones. Yeah,
it's all about incentives. They will behave their incentives and rationalize. It does, as long as you find some sort of rationalization that fits their conscience, they'll behave the incentive. As long as you can point to them that this is the incentive.
So perhaps this isn't your bailiwick, but let's get a little bit more practical. I mean, if the goal is to eventually own a village, you're making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year. You're feeling pretty comfortable. You've got maybe a mountain of student and credit card debt, maybe a little bit of a retirement account, but you can't afford a village. What's the first step?
Someone's going to have to, take one for the team first and go through the process of turning this thing into a, kind of a formalized corporation that has shares that can be bought and sold. And like somebody's going to, it's probably going to be some rich bastard that's going to have to get that, at least get that process started to where it can be done. At that point, you kind of just hostile takeover and, it's like, all right, we're turning this thing into a corporation and it's going to have an IPO and you can buy and sell the shares of your ownership stake in this statecraft organization, New York Stock Exchange or something like that. Mm-hmm. And this is like Curtis Yarvin's idea that, you don't fight against the state. You just, use their own interests and say, okay, you guys are the ones who are in charge. You're getting all the shares and they're going to be, on this stock exchange, et cetera, et cetera. And now they can be bought and sold and traded. And it's basically you IPO the local government. You have to get somebody in there who can either convince them or hostile take over it to the point where you can just IPO either your local community or or if you're like in Nicaragua, which is like one of those popular places where they're trying to have like free enterprise zones. It's the same exact model where you're just going to be part of the state and a local territory, and you're saying, all right, this is ours now, and we're going to be running this as a private corporation, and we are the government. It's not a no government, it's a private government, which is basically the same thing.
So you'd need to do it in a place with a weak government or a government with a low time preference for power.
That's not necessarily a low time preference for power, because remember that if there's a time preference for power, it works the same way as debt, where I can steal from the future steal for my future consumption to have it right now. And all you need to do is make sure that, that you're paying them enough that it's worth it in the present, for them to consume all of their power from the future. So that's the basic idea behind, monetary debt. And that works the same way with power, that if you can convince them that, hey, that I'm paying you, I don't know, like 10, 15, 20 years of taxes up front right now, you would have had to wait 10 years or 20 years to get that kind of predation from me. I'm giving it to you all right now. It's like, I'm sure you can find, I'm giving you all of this money. I'm sure you can find better uses for it in the meantime, 20 years or something like that. And this is what you could, this is what we wanted. And you can just, I'm buying the territory and buying my freedom from you. And is that a deal you'll think you can take? And I think there's a lot of, politicians that would say, that sounds like a good deal. It's like, I don't know, maybe you're in a cash-strapped area, you're in a poor country, and et cetera, et cetera. And, that's that deal might, appeal to you. And, if you again, you don't want to let them renege on that deal, but, that's something you could plausibly do, is that they're politicians. They have election incentives. They have power incentives. Part of that is they want, more power right now. Power is preferable in the present as it is in the future. So, if they, that's what you're playing on, is their time preference for power. Do you want more now, or you want a little bit less right now, or more in the future? Depends on how long you have to wait. It's the marshmallow question. How long do you want to wait? What's worth it to you? What's your patience and your time worth to you? So that's it's not about finding a low time. If you have a higher time preference government, it might be a lot more expensive, but lower time preference government might be, more affordable, but it's not a requirement.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, I guess the reason that I thought it wouldn't necessarily work in for want of a better term, progressive area is just because, Rand Paul tried to do it with Detroit when they went bankrupt a few years ago, and it got, not only did it not go anywhere, it got laughed at. Whereas, you just gave the example of Republicans in Florida going for it. So,
that's the thing, is that your lefties, because they are willing to burn their own cities to the ground just so they can rule over the ashes. Yeah. If they're in charge, it's like, that's a real tough thing to do. It's like, that is, it's really unaffordable, but it's possible. But, you're just, no one has that kind of money to buy them off. They have such a love for power that it's just unquenchable. Like, they're literally willing to burn their own cities to the ground to rule over ashes. And you see this all throughout human history, where the people are kings and democracies, and they'll all go to war with each other, and they'll one will conquer the other, and except the conquered territory is just in ruins now. It's way less valuable than it was before, but they have power, and that just means everything to them. So and if you have someone like that, it's like, you can't bribe a person like that. You can't bribe a person out of love. That's the problem. You can't, it's like, how much am I going to have to pay you to divorce your wife that you really love, or someone like that? It's like, how much am I going to have to pay you to, stop loving your kid? It's like, you can't do it. And if you have a leftist who really just has a love for power, it's like, there's no real, there's no paying them for something that they love.
Okay, so that would be the limit of that framework. Then you wouldn't be able to do it if there's already left wingers in power.
Yeah, or you're gonna have to figure something else out, because there are ways to do it, and we've seen it done. Like what you've seen done, like in Colorado, when we got weed legalized. That's a good thing. But what happened was they were facing a 25% deficit. They were spending $50 billion a year, and they're taking in $40 billion a year. And and this was in the 2012 or 2013, and it's like the heart of the Obama recession. and which they never really ended. Unfortunately, it kind of just transitioned into where we are now. But they were at that time they were facing a 25% budget deficit, and they're freaking out. They're about to have real bankruptcy. So what they did was they legalized weed, and they put a $7 to $9 billion tax on it, and that eliminated their budget deficit by 98%. And so they were in incredible financial hardships, and they were willing to sell some of the liberty back to people for that in exchange for that 25% tax hike. That's why we legalized and a 25% tax hike at the same time.
Yeah.
It wasn't one or the other, it was both, and it was a trade.
And arguably a more docile population.
Yeah, and again, I agree with not putting generations of Black families in prisons and paying for that out of my own tax dollars, et cetera, et cetera. I agree that people shouldn't be put in a cage for smoking a blunt and all that. That's all correct and moral and good, but okay, the 25% tax at the same time is you can't ignore that. So if you have something like a Detroit or a California or New York that is just, they are clearly willing to burn their city to the ground. Like in the case of Minneapolis, quite literally.
Yeah.
It's like or Portland, it's they're going to sell you some of your liberty back, but it's not going to be all of it. Yeah. It's they're not going to be willing to privatize this thing because this is these are the Cains of the world. Like the biblical Cain is the archetype for the first king. And, you don't have to believe that that's real. It's just an archetype. And, if you have a more secular audience, you probably do. But you can just say, okay, Cain, he kills his brother Abel, and then God puts this mark on his head that says, if anyone aggresses against Cain and kills him, then, God's retribution against him will be, sevenfold or something like that. And so Cain takes that mark that says basically no one can aggress against me, and he goes and founds the city because it's who can aggress against? He can aggress against other people, but people can't aggress back against him. And so but he's driven. But part of that was he's driven from the ground. He's driven from being productive. So you have this archetype of a person who cannot be productive and can only be a predator. And and his job is to provide an aggressive order to the city using his violence. And, that's the kind of person you have in a leftist it's a Cain archetype of they can't be productive. And unfortunately, Abel is the productive type. He's the productive archetype. Oops. And so so someone like that, it's if you were to try to privatize that, basically what you're saying is you're going to be out of house and home. You need to retire. Mm-hmm. It's what amount of money for a leftist is good for them to retire on? And all of the leftists, it's that's tough. Yeah, it's a lot. So, but if they're in some sort of financial hardship, you can probably get something out of them, like drug decriminalization or legalization or something like that. You could probably get something like that.
Yarvin's, and I'm sorry to keep bringing him up. It just, you guys are kind of similar, and I will probably never get him on the show. So I'd like to hear your thought on his. So his idea, I guess, is that eventually some, strongman president will be elected, someone similar to FDR, and that person will then be able to, based on his political capital, because he ran on this as a platform, essentially dissolve the nominally executive branch bureaucracies. But in order to maintain the goodwill that he has on, from the people who staff those bureaucracies, he's going to give them their full salary for the rest of their life. It's only going to cost a couple $1 billion. I mean, what's that to me?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Or?
Yeah. I mean, that was what worked kind of with the Nazis. Yeah. Which was kind of his point.
And that's what he compares it to. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, I mean, there are former SS officers, still alive today who are still receiving a pension from Germany. And because it's an easy way to get people to stop fighting is to give them a retirement policy. And, it's that is kind of what will come eventually. I don't know if it'll come in my lifetime, but it's certainly what's being demanded right now, and you can see it in the fear of the ruling class. Because remember, they were afraid of Trump, and because he was like the exact archetype of what they're supposed to be afraid of. It's a private CEO, which is probably where it's going to come from. He's a billionaire, and he's a right-wing kind of a demagogue, and basically he's a Julius Caesar type. And remember, with Julius Caesar, he was from the Populist Party, or Populares, as as it was in Latin, and he was, the people loved him, and he was a real right winger, and who opposed the optimists or progressives, and you go down the list. He got betrayed by his own party because they're like, he's going to be a dictator, and he's like, I don't want to be a dictator. He ended up being that anyway, but you kind of forced him into it, and he tried to show the other party immediately, for a long time that. Repeatedly, I don't want to be a dictator. I just want to go do my own thing and the other side of the mountain range, and you guys can just leave me alone, and we're going to have peace. And they're just rejecting it. We don't believe you, tough. We're going to go to war with you. And then he beat him in the war. And so as Trump was the spitting image of Julius Caesar.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember his victory speech after he beat Hillary, but that's what he was talking about. All of that bipartisan, we're going to work together. I'm the president of all America. Everything that every president says. But you felt wow, this is not what I was expecting from him. If you were of the Trump's going to be a dictator,
pretty much
bent, which I was totally blue pilled on Trump in 2016, which is weird because I was firmly in the right libertarian, for want of a better term,
really
spheres. Yeah, I was in the Tom Woods Facebook group. I was everywhere. But I was totally Trump's gonna be our first dictator president, because of course I didn't know anything about FDR or Lincoln yet.
And that's kind of one of the incentives that comes out of archotropism, because the archos, it comes from two Greek words, archos and tropos. Archos, for archon, but for a ruler, and tropos is to turn. So archotropism is to turn towards rulers as the process of how society ends up becoming tends towards our rulers. So and the way it usually happens is chaos is demanding of order. Remember, the state is to provide an aggressive order. So if you have chaos is out there, whoever is the one who supplies the order has more power because they're providing the value. And so basically, if you have this ruling class which is kind of in disarray, and they're it's unconsolidated power, that's chaos. And they're having all of this fear in their minds because they see the cycles of history and what's coming and what's demanded. And all of a sudden, this thing shows up, and it looks a lot like what it's supposed to look like historically.
Yeah, and
you're just freaking the fuck out because it's history's repeating. Oh my god. And he's just no, I don't really want to do that. Can we just get along? And he's these. It's really strange. He's a spitting archetype. He's a spitting image of Julius Caesar, but none of the aggression. He didn't want to do any aggression against him. He kind of just wanted to work together and be a businessman. And so, but basically, it's their chaos in their own minds that's demanding this kind of order come. It's that. That's the utter irony of it, is that it's their own demand. It's the state in reverse. It's their own chaos that is demanding this new supplier of right-wing order to come along. So, and this is what's going to do them in, is that they're the ones demanding this one right-wing demagogue, what Yarvin kind of describes, who's going to run on this platform of this thing doesn't work. And we're just going to get rid of it, and we're going to give everyone pensions, and we're going to deal, and then we're just going to privatize it, get rid of it. And this is what it looks like. This is what it's like. They're demanding, because even right now, Kamala Harris can't consolidate power. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but she's she can't get Cuomo out, and Cuomo can't get her out. And there's this fight on the left for who's actually in charge, because God knows it's not Biden.
Right.
And
so why is it Kamala and Cuomo? I mean, obviously Cuomo's under fire right now, but like why are they the...
Because he's the basically he's the almost like the Mark Antony to her Cleopatra. And remember, she fucked her way into power, so which is really interesting because everyone compares us to Rome. But but right now because she's the real president. It's not Biden. We all know he's not there, and the lights that elevator doesn't go all the way to the top anymore. Yeah. So basically, with Cuomo, he's the only other real hardcore powerful governor who's been, who can really challenge her. And he's the only, like Newsom really could, but not really. He doesn't have that. He's too feminine. Yeah. And Cuomo, he looks like a man.
Well, and they're East Coast versus West Coast, which is that's the age-old American dichotomy.
Yeah, and basically they're both fighting each other for power right now. And you see this, like she's trying to Me Too him, and he's driving her approval rating into the dirt. Like her approval rating is like she's like the least approved, vice president in like 100 years. Yeah, and like everyone hates her. Because, no shit, she's really hateable. It's really comes real naturally to us normal people who hate a reptile like her. And
you're such a sexist and racist. Jesus, Andrew. Why would you say something like that?
You can't be sexist against someone who's not a human. Yeah. Come on. She's a lizard person. Everyone knows she's just wearing a skin suit. Yeah. And, so is Cuomo, by the way. But he killed tens of thousands of old people just heartlessly. And
then won a Grammy for it. Let's not forget.
And blamed us for it. Blame the unvaccinated. So these two are fighting each other for power right now because they're the only two who can really take it on the left. And power isn't something you ask for; it's something you take by force. Yeah. And or you can buy it. Which is like that does happen. We did it. We got private property the first time. That way. So it definitely works. Yeah. And, we get a little bit more privatized this time around. That's what we're going for. But the
other thing, and I want to point it out because Matt actually said it on this show and just a couple of episodes ago, he said, power is not something you ask for. It's something you create. Or maybe that's liberty. Probably the same thing.
Yeah. Liberty too. Liberty is really it's a negative. It doesn't really exist. Yeah. It's the negative of power. So it's the outline of power. Yeah. So if you have the power to decide over your own life, that's what liberty is. Yeah. And so it's really just the power to choose over your own life. And so when you're asking for liberty, you're actually asking for power. And you're asking for the power to choose over your own life. And that's all that's what. So when you're asking for liberty, it's like you don't ask for power. You take it by force. You take it because someone else can't maintain it. And you find an easy target who's like an old boomer who's in his 60s and he's elected. He can't block walk anymore. And he's kind of lazy, doesn't really want to campaign. He's not really going to fight you for it because he's old anyway. He's just tired. And, that's the person you want to go after, if you're going to just take it. Or if you, can find some way to buy it, from like a third world government, you can buy an island somewhere or something like that. That'll work. They'll go. A lot of them will go for it, and that's that's one idea that I think you'll have a lot of older politicians will probably go for. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. Your question. Matt was talking about liberty as something you have to create, or something you have to kind of take by force. Again, that's what power is. You have to create power, or you have to take it. And you can create power in the form of wealth, and then convert that wealth into influence or power.
So when you've created power via wealth, is that adding to the supply of power, or is it taking power from someone else?
That adds to the supply, but it transfers the value.
So is power inflationary or deflationary?
It's inflationary. Okay. Basically, that's the way it basically works via inflation. So when you create a new dollar, you didn't really create any new wealth, but you just transferred some of the purchasing power of all the other dollars. Okay. And so when you create new power or new wealth, you didn't really it has two kinds of value. One is an economic value, which is, positive sum. It's additive. And then there's zero sum, which is just transfers. Every kind of wealth has two kinds of values to it. It's not just the economic value, which is something, your more libertarian-minded people are all very familiar with. It's the economic positive sum kind of value, which is very additive and adds to the wealth supply. And and it doesn't devalue nothing. Like my iPhone doesn't get less valuable because someone creates some Paloma Verde CBD.
Offer code Blackbird to check out for 75% off your order. 25% off your order.
25% off your order.
Jesus, I said 75 earlier. Yeah, no, you're not getting 75% off your order. Anyway, sorry.
And, but yeah, so it's like that's like these two are positive sum. But their wealth value, but their power value is zero sum. So you create some new wealth that transfers some of the power from the pre-existing wealth, or that could be converted into coercive power. So you can create power, but the value from it just gets transferred from all of the pre-existing power.
So if the value of power is inflationary, does that mean that if you and I, as peasants in this neo-feudal system or whatever, create power, potential power for ourselves, does that mean that it decreases the amount of, dilutes the pool of power for the state?
So basically, the economic value is positive sum, meaning it's additive.
Sure.
Whereas the value of power is zero sum. So when we as peasants create new wealth, which is new power, that dilutes all of the pre-existing power. And so that's kind of what you're talking about with inflation.
Yeah.
And so when that's the way a zero sum game works. And this is why the left, they see all value as power value. So they see everything as zero sum. This is where that comes from. They're not making it up. They really do see that, all of this production around them has a zero sum component to it. And they're not wrong about that. It's just it's the wrong kind of value. There's two kinds of value. One is the economic kind. One is the power kind. And libertarians and right wingers are more sensitive to the economic kind, whereas lefties are more sensitive to the power kind. And so when we as peasants create new wealth, this is effectively predation from the state's point of view, because remember that their job is to consolidate power. So when we're creating new unconsolidated power, to them, this is a bad thing. This is why they will tax production instead of consumption. And it's not an accident. They're doing this deliberately because it's not about funding the government. It's about making sure that not all the high producers don't get out of control. They don't get too much power. And this was why they make that production tax progressive. It's an income tax. The high producers are the ones who need to be punished the most because the state fears them, because that's the wealth they're creating is unconsolidated power. And it's in the state's best interest, or in the predator's best interest, not to allow other people to consolidate too much wealth, because that wealth is power.
So do you differentiate between the leftists who are, the ones who are serving up milk for people who've been pepper sprayed at the riots, and the leftists who are actually running for office and trying to actually take power? Or are they all the same? Okay.
Not really. But I mean, they do have different time preferences, because again, if you're successful in getting elected, you typically will have a lower, kind of a more middle time preference. Okay. You're not high or low, you're kind of in the middle, because that's what's most adaptive. Whereas your predators who are burning down cities and pepper spraying and throwing bricks at cops and looting stores and getting pepper sprayed by cops and serving up milk to the people who get pepper sprayed by the cops after they were trying to burn Minneapolis to the ground. It's those are people have a much, much higher. They're not even going to wait for the state to do the aggression. They're going to do the aggression themselves right now, DIY. Okay. Yeah, and that they have extraordinarily high time preferences for power, and they're probably not going to get elected. And the difference is one is a lot more effective, and the other is not. And the guy who's in the middle, he's a lot more effective because he can understand both systems and adapt accordingly over time. And whereas the other one is only adaptive to one of the systems.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
If you think like a Darwinian sort of thing where you want to adapt to all of reality, not just a little bit of reality. And that's where that comes from. You want to adapt to both systems, not just one. And same thing on the right.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Because I live here in Minneapolis, so I was kind of there for all of this. And
you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I live in the part of Minneapolis that's so bad that the cops are afraid to go enforce the laws, which is actually kind of nice for people who want to be left alone. The South Minneapolis, where that actually took place, is kind of a up and coming area, which
was.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, the house prices there are still going up. I mean, just like everywhere else. It's insane.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people moving, but I mean...
Who's moving in?
I have no idea. I have no idea. Oh, actually, no. I have a friend who bought a duplex in that very neighborhood not too long ago.
Damn.
But I run in like LGBTQ circles. I mean, that's people who are in that kind of milieu. Though, I mean, I used the word homeless guy at a party once, and I was corrected. The person was like, no, that's a person experiencing homelessness. I wasn't supposed to say homeless guy. So that's the kind of authoritarian people that I was talking about earlier when I asked you the question.
Politically correct. Yeah, very politically correct.
So that's the kind of person I was asking about versus the person who is solidly on the left, but who will abide and even engage in unpolitically correct humor and
policing. They're the ones policing this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, but they're not. Like, there's the people who are policing it, and then there's the people who are not only okay with it, but like engage in it. Is that a different sort of leftism in your time preference for power?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like when I'm dividing it, I kind of divide it along the middle. Right is below 50%, and left is above 50%, and so and you can say, okay, maybe the middle third is what you would call a middle person. So the kind of person who is I don't know, just gay, they're just a normal gay dude, and they're pretty chill about everything else, and they may just vote hardcore leftist. But that's about it. It's like, okay, they're kind of they're not like the real hardcore leftist who actively wants to burn civilization to the ground. They're not that guy, but they're still in the top half. So it's like left and right. It's are you above 50 or are you below 50? And if you're at 50, okay, I call you the middle.
I think that probably opens a good door for you to talk about degeneracy a little bit. That's a word that you use. At least you used it in conversation. I'm not sure I've ever heard you actually use it publicly, but it's a word that I kind of recoil when I hear it. I'd like to hear you humanize it a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I can call it libertinism or something like that, libertine lifestyles. And it's like,
but the thing is, the word degenerate has an implication that you are going away from your birth.
Society is degenerating back into barbarism. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And again, this is the problem with these sort of degenerate lifestyles is that they have an implicit these are prey behaviors, and a lot of people are going to kind of recoil at that. But if you remember that, I was saying, when I was saying earlier that by the second law of archotropism is that power likes to consolidate itself from low concentration to high concentration. So in other words, the strong prey upon the weak. No shit. And it doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it moral. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying that this is the incentive.
Okay.
And so and incentives get behaved, and they'll be rationalized some sort of way. And that doesn't make it right, but but it does make it real, and it's something that we have to deal with. I always treat archotropism as a problem, not as a solution. I don't advocate it. The state does, but I don't. So
is that why victimhood is
considered victimhood is a pretense for aggression?
It's like a badge of honor because it was made a badge of honor deliberately. In order
it has value to it because now I can aggress against you and take value from you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
it's a false pretense for aggression. Yeah.
So who did that? Is it just academia acting in the telos of the cathedral?
Well, I mean, the way I see it really is that, it kind of just is. It's something that has always existed. And, again, we can say this does have a starting point in time, but this incentive itself has always existed.
Mm-hmm.
Since the dawn of time, bad men have been using the sins of their enemies to, as a pretense for war and aggression and violence. And, that's that behavior of I'm the victim is as old, and therefore I'm going to go exact justice or whatever. It's as old as time. And that's what, so when they use the language of social justice or something like that, they're implying that, the people we're going up against have been unjust or whatever. Maybe they have, and, maybe they haven't, but that's that's like kind of victimhood idea. Victimhood has, the reason people want to be a victim is because they want to have power. They want to have that pretense for aggression because again, that aggression is power. But, I assume most of your audience are probably not the, like the victimhood types.
Oh yeah, no.
And I imagine they're not. And but then they're just like, they want to have a more libertine or as I call it, degenerate lifestyle. But understand all of these are prey behaviors because this is, you're kind of marking yourself as a target. And so like, if you're like a drug addict or something like that, and like, you can't say no to the drugs, and, or like you're an alcoholic who can't say no to the alcohol, or you are constantly fornicating and you're risking, a pregnancy or something like that. I don't know, maybe you're safe and you use some sort of contraception or something like that. All of these things, they add up,
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you're going to be, you're someone who is easy for the, somebody else to aggress against. So you're someone with a high demand for this aggressive defensive order.
Sure.
And, this is something the state incentivizes because it likes kind of having these sorts of people around who demand it to exist. And so maybe you don't like the idea that, they're going to be throwing people, you have a state that is going to be throwing people in cages for, like, drug addiction or something like that. And, I agree they should be put into hospitals instead. But but the fact that, they're like, we're allowing these sorts of things to exist, or the fact they do exist, not that we're allowing them to, but, I don't think we have that much power to really stop it, but because this is a human incentive that gets behaved one way or another. And, it's this sort of a thrill, drugs, or high seeking behavior, it's something that happens no matter what. But because of it, there's going to be a, state around that can basically be the apex predator of human civilization. And it is implied demand. I call it pseudo demand because you're basically creating the thing you fear.
Mm-hmm.
By being weak, you create the predator.
So as the former peasants who are now engaging in our own version of statecraft by accumulating potential power for ourselves, is there a way for us to capitalize on these people who are engaging wittingly or unwittingly in prey behaviors without being evil predators?
Tough. I don't know. It's like, imagine like you wanted to stack an army. Would you stack it full of drug addicts and, fornicators and divorcees and mentally ill people? And, it's like, that's not the kind of person you really want in your army.
I mean, it seems to work for the U.S. government.
No, it's like they take them in where they're nice and raised by two good parents or whatever, but they can take people and turn them around with hardcore in order. And that's a lot of reason why some people do want to join the military is because they have that demand for order because of the chaotic life they've lived.
Yeah,
and
that's actually what I meant just now.
Yeah, I mean, but they do that voluntarily. You don't do that with a draft.
Sure. Yeah.
And
when you do it with a draft, you get Vietnam.
Yeah, and it's a disaster. And it's like it's kind of tough because you're trying to tell a mentally ill person that they're sick and they don't want to hear it.
Mm.
And that's the I don't know, you can't give someone wisdom who doesn't know that they need it. And so I don't bother trying. And I think that's a Confucius quote, is that you don't give food to someone who isn't hungry. You don't give wisdom to someone who doesn't know that they need it.
And so that's kind of what it's exactly what Hoppe's talking about in his physical removal thing that gets so much attention, is that, when you have people who are in a society whose like aim is to degenerate that society, which, I don't want to give the word degeneracy a bad connotation. All it means is so the prefix D meaning like away from or breaking down from, generacy, which is like the genesis, the very creation of your society.
Yeah, uncreating civilization. You're
moving away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why Hoppe says that we have to physically remove, so to speak, these people. And I've said it even just about the Libertarian Party, make it as inhospitable for these people who are not working according to the ends of, the Mises Caucus or whatever, make it inhospitable for them because they're degenerating the liberty movement, so to speak. And I know that you and I differ on the efficacy of the party, or maybe we don't actually. I think
you're an agorist. Yeah,
I have agorist sympathies, certainly. I would never say that the LP is going to win the presidency.
Yeah, no.
I think that the utility of the LP is to give a place for libertarians of all stripes to kind of collaborate and work together, if
possibly,
anything.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to get into that. If you want to hear my opinions, I think I just laid it out pretty well on Jacob Winograd's show a couple of nights ago. So,
But yeah, the if you have these people, it's a tough thing because there's not really a good solution to it. Because they're not violating anybody's rights, and and so there's not really a pretense for aggression against them, except for the fact that this is pseudo demand. It behaves the same way as market demand, where it's like I can either be actively wanting and seeking out a government or a state derived order, or I could be kind of seeking them out by kind of chumming the waters for the sharks, because that's kind of what you're doing. It's like when you behave like prey in front of a predator, it's like it's like that. This is the way they think. I call them reptiles, for a reason. It's like I really do believe these people are predators, and it doesn't make it right, but it makes it real. It's something we have to deal with, and so that I call it pseudo demand because it behaves the same way as demand, even though when you fear something, you're willing to pay to make it go away. So because you're willing to pay something, that's an incentive for the predator to come in and take the payment and make you afraid. And it's a perverse incentive. It's pseudo demand. It behaves the same way as market demand. And it's when you do these things that make you weak, that make you to the point where you should be afraid, or you're poor and can't fight back. It's like you're making a demand for a state order to come in and save you from basically either yourself or someone else. And it's these people, when you have people like this, like in an Ancapistan or anarcho-covenant situation like Hoppe, it's like you can't have people in here who are creating an environment where a predator is going to want to come in and thrive. And because it's like, okay, it's like you're at a beach and you brought a bucket of like fish chum with you because you want to swim with sharks, and and so you everyone else is around you, and you're like, well, I have a right to swim with sharks, so I'm going to dump all the chum in the water, and now everyone's in danger,
right?
And because there's an incoming apex predator of the sea coming towards you now, because they can smell basically a drop of blood a mile away and the whole bucket full, you bet. And there's not a good solution to it. So when Hoppe says they have to be physically removed, obviously he's talking by peaceful means, of like kind of like banishment or exile. But I don't, it's still, that's a tough thing to do to people over what could be just a little thing. Like even the biblical anarcho-covenant didn't go that far. All of these behaviors were illegal. You were just told not to do them by the religion, and which, by the way, was voluntary because no one followed it. You make a thing voluntary, no one does it.
Well, so I mean, yeah, and that gets into the big question about Hapa. What happens when, you and I, and our fans create an anarcho covenant, a community based on that. But then we start breeding. I mean, I don't start breeding because I'm gay, but you start breeding, and our fans start breeding, and then the kids come in, and they're not real big on this whole order thing that we've created.
Yeah,
and they also didn't They didn't agree to our covenant. They didn't swear our oath. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we could kick them out.
Well, what you would do is, I mean, it's understood that this is an HOA, and it does have some sort of seniorage. I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but basically the way it was in the Anarcho Covenant was the covenant is tied to the land, and so it functions the same way as an HOA. That if you're going to transfer the ownership of the property, then you have to then the new owner has to sign the covenant.
Sure.
They have to be a signer to the covenant, and you can't transfer it if they're not to someone who isn't a signer. So it kind of works that way, but via inheritance. Like, you can't inherit the property if you're not part of the covenant, if you're not going to agree to it. So it's like, all right, well, you can have a kid, and they're not going to be able to inherit the property unless they agree to it. And if they don't want to agree to it, that's their right. They can leave. They can always leave and go anywhere else, and many people did. And you had Jewish trading all over the Mediterranean, where people just left the covenant and they went everywhere, and they spread out. And these were people who just didn't want to do it, wanted a different life, and just left. And if you have people who are like living there kind of as, I guess, it's the owner who is accountable for their behavior. Mm-hmm. And, if, the owner is accountable for their behavior, then, he has to have some power to control that. So, or you can go somewhere else. So the property owner has the responsibility, the accountability, and the power. And those all have to be in the same location. So like if it's his kid, once the kid grows up, as long as he's living with dad gets to make the rules. And if he doesn't want to obey dad's rules, he can go somewhere else. And if he if dad dies and he inherits the property, and well, he just signed a covenant, so that's his problem now. And if you're going to have to transfer it to someone else or sell it to someone else and then leave. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way that's going to work. And if you're going to be renting the property out to somebody, obviously, they're going to have to sign a covenant in the rent, in their rental agreement.
Yeah.
So
okay. So for the last few minutes, and I appreciate you expanding on that, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I guess the only then remaining question would be enforcement, and I don't really want to get into that, just because people can use their common sense as to how.
I would say a private state. I think Curtis Yarvin's idea. I know you say you didn't want to get into it, but I think it's a really short explanation where Curtis Yarvin, he talked about having private states, and where they're the legitimate owners of the land, and and I don't know if you manage to buy your own land from the private state, and you can always just still contract out, well, hey, I have my own covenant here, and I'm going to contract with you to be the enforcer of it if need be. And I'll pay you I'll still pay you like a monthly rate that's probably quite a lot lower, because you're not enforcing your laws, you're enforcing my laws.
Sure.
And I can always contract that with somebody else. And because there's market demand and market choices in there. So it's really easy to like if I have an HOA violation right now, it's like they're not enforcing that themselves. They just go to the local government and say, hey, we have a contract, he's not obeying it, and why don't you come in and do something about it? And they send the sheriff.
If you violate your HOA rules right now, I mean, can they kick you out of your house? Or
they can start putting liens on it and stuff like that, and they can do a lot. They can do quite a lot, and eventually those things all add up. And it's like I'm going to have to, and they can come after me pretty easily.
Wow.
So it's like that's the problem of legitimacy. Again, legitimacy is illegitimacy is a restraint on government. Legitimacy is an unrestraint. This means they're unrestrained. They're legitimate. They can do anything they want. So it's like that's the HOAs are typically not preferable to a local government. Local government, again, I always say governments exist to make evil lifestyles a lot more, they exist to facilitate them.
Sure.
They're not here to punish evildoers so much as they are to facilitate them. And so people tend to prefer their local governments to their HOAs for exactly that reason. Their local governments tend to be quite a lot more benign. And you have a lot more, a lot worse, moral busybodies in HOAs than you do in local governments.
Yeah, well, the local government will tell you how high your fence can be. The HOA will tell you can't have a fence. It's a little bit more tyrannical.
Can't own a gun, can't do this, can't do that, and can't have loud music or parties or anything. And governments tend to be a whole lot more lenient about those things.
Yeah. Okay, so the other day you were guesting on King Pilled, kind of. Matt brought you on because
Steve couldn't be there.
Right.
He's fighting poverty.
You said something that really stuck out to me. You said they're manufacturing consent for genocide.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Can you talk about that in 10 minutes or less?
Oh yeah, I can do that pretty quickly.
Good.
Right now remember that victimhood is a pretense for aggression. This is that. Where they're saying, hey, we the vaccinated are the victims because of these unvaccinated people not taking the jab. We're getting sick despite despite supposedly the vaccine being effective. Because the unvaccinated people are not taking any vaccine at all, and they're making it easy for this other virus to spread, et cetera, et cetera. It's all bullshit, of course, but it's not meant to be true. It's meant to be an adapted fiction or a lie. And in order to help generate this, hey, these are our victimizers and these are our oppressors, and we're the victims, we're going to go after them. And when you're saying like, okay, you're talking about like a third of the country doesn't want to take the jab because Jesus, man, this thing doesn't look safe. It's authorized, not approved. Why? I don't want to do it. And a lot of these are minorities too. And the state is like trying to start. Okay, we're going to have to start turning the screws on these people, and eventually there's going to be a final solution. It really is that simple. Because remember, we had this problem earlier of social media we talked about, where we're homogenizing the classes into, instead of upper class, lower class, white, left, black, Catholic, Protestant, et cetera, we're doing away with all of that. And we're doing, okay, you're the right class or you're the left class.
Yep.
And remember, they had that problem of being the organized minority against the disorganized majority, and how that just got thrown out the window by social media, which homogenized everything and, is breaking down all of these, what used to be social barriers and homogenizing everything. Okay, well, now they have to be the organized majority. And there's only one way to do that. And that is to be the only, people around. And because you can't do that. And, as an organized minority, that doesn't work. So you're going to need to get rid of the other side somehow. And that's why, best case scenario is like a national divorce or something like that.
Sure.
But this is the incentive.
Do you think it's more realistic that they will do like an actual physical genocide where they're killing people? Or is it going to be more of a digital genocide where they're just excluded from polite society online and, with their vax apps and all that stuff?
I think you could see some real containment. Like, I think you're going to see, they're going to call it quarantine. It's like, we're going to, it's gotten to the point where we need to quarantine these people. And because these people are, diseased and dangerous, et cetera, and we just have to quarantine them. And they're going to, instead of concentration camps, you call them a quarantine camp. And it's the only way we can keep them safe. And, it's like we're putting them in the cage so that they can be safe, and so can we. And because they can't, they're already not living free lifestyles because they've chosen to live in these ghettos. They've chosen to live in the ghettos, or what? No, it's not quite how that works. But this is history repeating itself again, because this is the incentive. Incentives change as time goes on, as new corporations come around, as new technologies come around, as climate changes. Everything about about that incentive, the incentives change because people change, everything changes. And, and it tends to, go in a cycle. And because of that, these incentive changes are dynamic and cyclical.
All right. The second question I had is not something you said. It's something that Dave Smith tweeted. And I just want to hear what you have to say about it. Both from an accuracy point of view and also from like a political messaging, whatever point of view. He tweeted out, ideologies don't defeat tyranny, great men do. Is that true? And is that good messaging for a political candidate who's looking to spread the message of liberty, so to speak?
It's not his best messaging, but it's true. That great men, it's men who defeat the bad men. The solution to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And, it's not the solution to a bad guy with a gun is not a good guy with a good idea. Okay, that doesn't work. And that's kind of just a fact. But this is why I asked him the question, because he had been kind of talking to Jose Gallison a little earlier about, you might need to go get some power. And I can tell he's thinking about it because right now his family is he's a dad who's going to be facing, is my kid going to be forced to get the jab? And I don't really want that. And my family, and he's got some protection instincts coming up that are going to be that are really demanding that, hey, buddy, you need power to defend. And, get the quest for power is going to be a necessary evil to him because he doesn't want to have power, but he's not being given much of a choice.
Yeah. He's got that libertarian zero time preference for power, right?
Yeah. He doesn't want to, be in charge. Just their problem is that they would make great rulers, except they don't want to be. And so, but now he's thinking a bit through the LP is how is the LP going to get me any power? It's not. And so that's why, I can see why, when he was talking to Jose, he was like, oh, you might need to use some, illibertarian means to get power, things that are not quite, in sync with our principles in order to get power. And you can say he's beginning that obvious conclusion that he's going to need some power if he's going to be able to protect the people he cares about. All of us are. And that's not just true of him, it's true of all of us. That, might doesn't quite, maybe it should, maybe might shouldn't make right, but it kind of does.
Yeah.
And it certainly makes reality. That's fairly uncontroversial. Might makes reality even, but it does make right, and it probably shouldn't.
Sure.
And human rights, they should be natural, they should be respected, but if they're unenforceable, do you really have them? No. So if your rights can't be enforced, you don't really have rights.
So what you're saying is Stirner's right?
Power. Huh?
Are you saying Stirner is right?
I'm not quite sure who Stirner is.
Oh, Stirner. He's the philosopher who might makes right. That was basically.
I thought that was
thing.
Hobbes, but
Stirner.
Oh, I'm going to have to read Stirner then.
He systematized it and didn't put value on it, so to speak.
Yeah, because I think the Nazis kind of took that to the logical conclusion of society. The state has an interest in the health of the people, and if you have Jews running around that are terrible, then we need to get rid of them, and they need to be visited. Yeah, the Nazis kind of took that idea to the logical conclusion. I'm saying that this is it's a logical conclusion, but it's a problem, and it's not a solution. Okay. They viewed it as a solution. I view it as a problem, and it's an engineering problem that we're going to need to solve somehow. And we should not be doing what the Nazis did, where they view this might makes right as a solution rather than a problem. It's a problem, and it's a problem that's going to be for us right now because we kind of need it. We kind of need some rights, some might, and we need some power, and we need to get it fast because time's running out, and we can kind of see the danger now. It's like the danger is visible. So, it's not like some hypothetical long, in decades to come. It's like probably maybe next year or maybe this year. And it's like, oof, it's like we're really running out of time. That's why I've kind of accelerated my timetable quite a lot, for Mises GOP to try to we're going to need to move a lot quicker. They're coming fast.
All right. Well, that's a real black pill to end on, but I don't really believe
there's a lot of hope. Join Mises GOP. I have a plan. I think you've heard some of that today, at least what my thinking on it is.
Yeah.
And if you want to join Mises GOP, this is our last hope. This is it.
How do you find more about Mises GOP?
You can go join the MeWe group or follow it on Twitter as of right now. I'm still waiting to get the tax ID back so I can start opening a bank account.
Oh, cool. Okay. So you're real serious about it.
Yeah, I'm real serious about this. The danger is visible. If I'm not serious about this, I'm fucking retarded. I'm not going to.
Is it just at Mises GOP on Twitter then?
GOP Mises, I think.
Okay. I'll find it.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like people to know about you, where they can follow you and all that?
You can follow me at @popularliberty_ on Twitter. You can find me at Popular Liberty on YouTube. You can find me basically in the Part of the Problem Inner Circle, where I'm the main moderator. And not Dave's enemy at all. Love him. He's great. And you'll be hearing more about the Praxian approach to kind of help using the GOP to get some liberty back in the coming months. That's the Praxian approach is what we're taking with the Mises GOP. So you'll hear more about that soon. Just stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Andrew, for giving me a couple of hours of your time today, and I hope we will do it again.
All right. Thanks, James. I really appreciate the platform and wonderful conversation.
All right. Thanks again to Andrew for joining me today, and thanks to you, as always, for tuning in. Remember, if you want to make sure that you're updated every single time I produce a piece of content, whether it's an episode of this show or something written, make sure that you're signed up with your email address at blackbirdpodcast.com. And of course, if you would like to support the show financially and in return get these interviews a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks early, and with the inclusion of pre-show banter where you get to listen in on what the guests and I are talking about before I formally welcome them to the show, then sign up for a paid option. I believe it's only $7 a month right now, which is pretty cheap. And if you want to sign up for an annual plan, it's even cheaper at $70 a month. That's 2 free months. Once again, that's blackbirdpodcast.com. And you can sign up with your email address for all of the content that I release to the public. And you can sign up with a few bucks to get early and extra bonus content as it is released. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode of Blackbird. Until then, live free.